Thanks, Todd. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning with everybody and to give you a little bit of an overview of Southeast Asia. I've only got 10 minutes and it's a huge amount to cover, so this is going to be a very, very, very quick brush over the surface, but anybody that would like to have more detailed information and some follow-up, very happy to engage with you directly after the session. Overview of Southeast Asia, we're talking 11 very different countries, ranging from fully developed and technologically advanced Singapore through to developing countries such as Indonesia, right up to the north where you've got very underdeveloped countries such as Myanmar, Cambodia and Laos. What is not often known about the Southeast Asian region is that the combination of those countries together forms Australia's second largest trading partner. Around 15% of Australia's total trade is with the ASEAN region. Characteristics of countries across the region: expanding cities. Over 50 cities in the ASEAN have populations of over 500,000 people. Indonesia, for example, by 2025, it's expected that 68% of their population will be urbanised. That constitutes 194 million people. There is a growing consumer class in the ASEAN region. By 2030, 500 million people in ASEAN will be of working age. They are young, increasingly urbanised, digitised, educated and growing in wealth. This is resulting in a shift towards demand for higher value goods, away from commodity staples towards things like quality food, dairy, agriculture and high tech. There's an innovation and digital transformation underway in ASEAN. In 2020, ASEAN released its Ict Master Plan with 5 key objectives. They want to create themselves as a single regional market, accessible, inclusive and affordable digital economy, and the deployment of next-gen ICT. Many countries in the ASEAN region have actually skipped generations in technology. They missed the landline generation, they went straight to mobile phones. They are creating a secure digital marketplace and they're looking for safe online communities. There's deepening integration and strengthening connectivity throughout the region. Australia is on their doorstep and we are really well placed to make the most of this opportunity, the opportunities that this creates. Australia became ASEAN's very first dialogue partner back in 1974. It has a strategic partnership which it signed off with ASEAN, established in 2014, and that's underpinned by a whole raft of comprehensive strategic partnerships and free trade agreements. So the framework is there in place for Australian companies, South Australian companies, to make the most of engaging in the ASEAN region. We might just move to the next slide, please, Ben. COVID-19, of course. I don't think there's a brief that you're going to attend in this current climate that doesn't mention COVID-19 as an impact on current market conditions. Vietnam, Singapore and Brunei have all handled COVID-19 well. Malaysia, the Philippines, Indonesia are struggling. Thailand started off doing reasonably well, but is now struggling with a recent outbreak of the UK variant. This is having huge impacts on supply chains and tourism, which is really critical in countries such as Thailand. Bangkok, for example, was the #1 most visited city in the world prior to the COVID-19 crisis, and that's now reduced from about 40 million visitors years down to about 10. Geopolitical tensions are another key impact on the region. The crisis in Myanmar is making all the neighbouring countries quite nervous. And interestingly, ASEAN countries that would normally sit back and watch a crisis like that and leave the country to make its own decisions, in this current climate, countries such as Singapore have actually come out and made quite negative comments about what's going on and have urged the leadership to find a path to resolution. So these sorts of tensions are bubbling away below the surface. And of course, most importantly, what's happening with China. All eyes are nervously watching what's happening with China, both from a geopolitical and a strategic perspective, but also what impact that's having on economic markets. China's made incursions into other countries' exclusive economic zones, such as the Philippines, Brunei and Vietnam. So countries like that are looking for how they can acquire technology and capability to be able to deter and resist those sorts of activities. In the short term, there is a hope for travel bubbles. Singapore, particularly as a regional hub, is desperate to open travel bubbles. The first one it's planning to open is with Hong Kong at the end of this month, and it's then also working very hard to get travel bubbles established with Australia, Vietnam, New Zealand, and Taiwan. So once those open up, there'll be opportunities for business travel and leisure travel once more. The COVID-19 has also forced countries to start considering just diversification opportunities. And this is also being influenced by what's happening in China. So I think there's been a global trend to move production of commodities away from places like China and particularly into countries like Vietnam. Electronics is a particular opportunity there as well too. There is a boom in infrastructure projects across the region, and I'll mention that a little bit more on the next couple of slides. And there is a demand for innovative everything tech in line with their master ICT plan. Health tech, biotech, edutech, fintech, agritech, all of those things are in high demand across the region. E-commerce, there's been a huge spike in the demand for food, beverage, premium wine and consumer goods. So those, again, too, create opportunities for countries like, for companies in South Australia. And that leads me up into the next slide. South Australia, it's your time. Everything that's exciting in South Australia at the moment, it's happening in the defence and space sectors, infrastructure sector, resources and energy, health services, everything tech. You are going to find an opportunity in Southeast Asia. For example, the continuous shipbuilding program is going to give small and medium enterprises in South Australia the opportunity to develop capabilities and goods and services that are going to be of significant interest in areas such as maritime surveillance, for example, in the Philippines, Vietnam and Brunei. Space sector, Singapore in particular is leading the charge in space. Singapore is a very small island and Australia is a very large island. Singapore doesn't have the space to be able to establish launch facilities, but it does have technological capability and it has a really strong interest in this sector. So that's a real opportunity for South Australian companies to get engaged in that area as well too. Infrastructure, $1 trillion US per annum of infrastructure development across the Southeast Asia region. Ambitious infrastructure programs in Thailand, rail, roads, seaports, smart cities. Philippines has relaunched its Build, Build, Build program. It sees this way as its infrastructure building as its way out of poverty. Indonesia urbanisation, 194 million people living in cities in Indonesia by 2025. There is a huge demand for smart cities and all the infrastructure and capability that goes along with that kind of demand for services. Resources and energy, oil and gas is still a major demand, but more exciting, renewables. Wind, solar, hydrogen. The challenge for Australian companies is going to be how do we store and how do we transport that? And that creates in itself, that challenge creates more opportunities. Indonesia, this is also leading to spin-off sectors. For example, Indonesia is a major destination for mining equipment and technology. Health services, 1 in 4 Singaporeans is going to be over the age of 65 by 2030. They are keenly interested in aged services capabilities. There's a growing middle class. They want to live well. They want to age well. Health services, e-services, all those sorts of things are going to be demand in the next decade. And as I said before, everything tech. Health tech, biotech, fintech, agtech. If it's got a tech, they're interested in countries, Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia in particular, Vietnam and Thailand. How can we help? Well, I'm going to say I've been 4 days in the job, but I am more than willing to get to know companies, South Australian companies, and to provide more tailored services rather than just a generic overview brief. We can provide things like market intelligence, on-the-ground representation. We've had a lot of success in the last year. We've become very clever at delivering virtual trade shows, and that has led to, in the defence sector where I've been working, it's led to some significant opportunities, requests for quotes, sometimes in the value of $2 million that have come out of those. Specialised events, Singapore's running a Pinot picnic at the moment. There's other opportunities in various different sectors around the defence space, renewables and tech sectors. Business introductions and networking. We have got myself now here in Singapore. We've got Adil in Malaysia. As travel bubbles open up, as we start being able to engage, we are here to help provide with business introductions, networking, and introduce you to the people that we know up here that will help you find opportunities for your sectors. And SA Club, which is an initiative. And I think perhaps, Todd, on that note, maybe I pass over to you to get a little bit more detail around that and some of the other things that DTI does.
Thanks, Kristan. A lot of this group were in the last session. So, yeah, the SA Club was founded in London at the Office of the Agent General a few years ago. And predominantly started out as a bit of an ambassador network. And some of you may remember, probably, I reckon, about 15 years ago, when I was actually an SA ambassador based in the US when I was there, where they had this kind of ambassador network of expats that would help kind of, subconsciously or otherwise promote South Australia and the benefits of what we've got available into those markets. So the London office formed the South Australia Club, and then gave the opportunity for local companies to, do tastings and connections and things like that through the kind of wider expat network. And then various chapters have opened up across the world in the last probably 6 years. And we do have a chapter in Thailand, and we have a chapter in Singapore. And so that it's probably, to be honest, it's probably sat a little dormant in the last probably 18 months or so, as you might expect with COVID. But certainly with Kristan starting in Singapore, and as there's travel bubbles and things come out, I think, where perhaps some chapters were used as, dare I say it, a bit of a drinks club, and the expats catching up with some free tastings of wine and a bit of, South Aussie food's great. But for us, for Chris and myself and the team, we'd rather get you guys connected to someone in that room that might get you connected to someone that gets you a deal or a JV or a partner or an investor or whatever it is that you're looking for. That's what it is about. And so, yep, Drinks Club, good on you. You can turn up to, and as all of you know in Adelaide, you can have breakfast, lunch and dinner here and every day and do networking. And there's a serial bunch of networkers out there, and God love them. But this is more about getting you connected where you can actually get some business done. So that's what we're aiming to do to the evolution of the SA Club. So there's that piece. The other part of it too, as I mentioned before, certainly the first port of call is the Trade Start Network and the trade advisors, as I mentioned before. We do, I didn't mention this last time, we do have a DTI stand over in the other pavilion, and you'll probably see that over there. So we've got staff on there all day. So if you want to have a chat with them around any specifics, catching up, doing all of that. I know a couple of you are connected with me now, that will follow up afterwards on connecting up with overseas officers and a few other bits as well. So questions for Kristan. The ASEAN market, as I alluded to, and then Kristan confirmed, it's the second largest trading region for the state and for Australia. So it's a big part of it, and there's lots of opportunities there. So questions?
Just wondering about their the tax system, the overall for those countries that they have a fair low tax, like the company tax or importing tax, those arrangements. And second is that what's the big difference about your feeling the doing business comparing to doing business in Australia and doing business in those southeastern Pacific countries, like the formats or just meetings or something different?
Yeah, so I would say that it does depend on the countries. As I mentioned before, they're in 11 very different countries. Singapore has a comprehensive strategic partnership with Australia, and it has a cultural heritage that is similar in the respect of having, the rule of law and so forth. So it is it's a very structured environment. It's a low risk environment for doing business in Singapore. Vietnam is making a lot of changes and is really trying to position itself well as a destination for engagement with Australia. And again, it is looking to reduce sort of like the range of the bureaucracy and the red tape that goes on to do business there. I think there's a general shift in countries towards that is probably driven to a large extent by concern over what's happening with China. ASEAN wants to be a peaceful, prosperous region, so they are looking to engage more with Australia, and they realise that they need to create the regulatory environment to be able to do that. I would say that there is still going to be issues in countries such as Indonesia, Malaysia, where you still are going to have a degree of difficulty and corruption and bureaucracy. But there's a general shift. I think that Singapore's leading the way in that respect, and I would say that they are becoming more better climates in which to do business, and that will hopefully only develop over the coming decade.
And yeah, thanks, Chris. And the other thing that we found too over the journey is quite a few companies end up working with someone perhaps in a hub sense. So you find that they'll have a partner, say in Singapore, that also has then kind of the hub and spoke model where you might have inventory sitting in Singapore as a hub and then having set partnerships with that hub partner out to those other regions. So your actual export goes into, for example, Singapore, if that's the case, or in some cases we know KL's quite a big piece too with that kind of hub and with logistics. And so you're exporting into Malaysia, but then your product is then sent out from that one point. We've seen some companies have some good benefits of that, but like everything, and we talked about this before, right? Forget COVID, everything else, it's still about relationship. So you've really got to, there's a bit of buyer beware, and there's, that's, our role here too. We're not lawyers. We do some due diligence, but we're not lawyers. And, to get legal advice and some of that stuff, we do help with some of that, but we'd certainly reckon, and we do have connections in market to help you with, legal advice or tax advice and all of that stuff. We can get you some connections through there as well. So, yes, next question.
Hi, Kristan, Dennis here. I would like to ask you, in terms of Australian companies and domain registration in Singapore, .sg domain as an Australian entity, what are the options for us to register a domain without having an entity in Singapore? Do you have any information? Thank you.
So I would say that, and I would have to probably check the technical detail around this, but like Australia, Singapore wants countries to be registered locally so that it can, make sure that it's got a functioning and well regulated system. So they do, if you want to do business with the Singaporean government, you need to register with the GBIS website, and you will have to go through a formal registration process of having some kind of presence on shore, and that would relate to everything in Singapore is regulated by your ID card and your company UEN. So in order to get a domain, you would need to be registered, have an entity number there as well too. So.
Yes, it is a highly regulated area, but again, we can help navigate with some linkages to that if you need it, Dennis. The other part of this, ladies and gentlemen, is, like I said before, we're doing an awful lot of virtual type events, programs, missions, if you like, changing that around. In Malaysia at the minute, Adil's been working on a connection with a couple of big retailers there, so particularly in the specialty food area. And so those EOIs go out. It's certainly say keep a tab on our website and talk to your trade advisor if you're working with the trade team to keep up to date with that. Like I said before, we've probably got just over 20 virtual programs all over the world right now. It's really busy. My team is super busy, but as I said before, I've got our team working on, I'd rather us go out as a state and try 100 things. Right now, given the world that we're in, I'd rather go out and have a crack at 100 things. And if we get, 90 of things are not so bad, 5 are pretty good, 3 are awesome, and 2 are absolutely outstanding. For me, that's a bit of success. That means we're actually out there, as a state out there and having a crack and just trying things on, right? And, we had a chat, one of our overseas officers yesterday, and learnings from what we've done. We've got some feedback from from our businesses. We'll get feedback from buyers at the other end, what's working, what's not. Even simple things like pitch training. We did a US program late last year. I did a day of kind of pitch training. We had all companies come through, American Idol style, on a panel and had them actually pitch what they were going to pitch to us. And it actually helps, right? I'm pretty brutal when it comes to that because you've got to be able to pitch to the buyer and eliminate the possibility that they need to think about anything. You just try and make it as easy as you can. So simple things like having your price list in that example, US dollars. Don't turn up with your Australian price list. Do the conversion because the buyer at the other end doesn't have time because there's 50,000 other yahoos like us turning up every day trying to sell their stuff. Make it easy for the buyer. Simple little things like that along the way. Those tips really help along the way through. So, yeah, a lot of the virtual programs we've got going on. Some of it is in a kind of group setting but the B2B work is one-on-one, right? So it's you with the buyer in the room, in a virtual room and doing your pitch and all of that. I've sat off camera, literally holding the hand of some of them who get quite nervous. Pitching's they're the two big things I've found with exporters. And I've done it myself. Prior to government, I actually had a business in the US and exported. So one is market research and having market intelligence on the market that you're approaching. And the second part is pitching, the ability to pitch, right? And adjusting your pitch to suit who you're pitching to, having some understanding around the market, the cultural references, those types of pieces. So you're not so much upsetting them people, but knowing how to pitch to someone that gets that kind of decision-making process through. Unique selling proposition. You know, we're a wine company, 5th family generation, and we do quality wine. Yep, you and 30,000 others, same story, right? What's the unique selling proposition? Those types of things. So, as you know, Kristan coming into this role, it's not just one market; it's many markets with very different styles, culturally or otherwise, in different stages of their kind of a allowance of import kind of experience as well. So a lot of the buyers and things that we deal with may not have dealt with Australian companies before or South Australian companies before, and just accepting it. I actually heard someone in a pitch talk about the Adelaide Crows in a pitch to an overseas market, and you go, they wouldn't know what AFL footy is, let alone the Adelaide Crows, let alone, you know, a particular player. So really simple little things that just, you know, nuances that might help you with your selling and getting through. So yeah, you mentioned e-commerce, Kristan. That's been a bit of a flavour recently, and it's a bit of education. Austrade have quite a detailed educational piece on their website. In terms of the logistics part, Kristan, if a company was to do e-commerce, say, across 3 markets in ASEAN, are you seeing companies doing the hub piece where they put inventory into one market and then send it out from there, or would they have inventory in each market?
Well, I think at the moment what they are doing is that, I mean, Singapore is still positioning itself as a regional hub for those sorts of things. And, you know, the international freight assistance mechanism is trying to get those products out. In terms of what other countries, Todd, you're going to have to give me a little bit of grace. 4 days into the role, I'll have to take that one on. Some further exploring for you.
Yeah, good. That's right. I keep forgetting you're only 4 days in. That's right. I know we did drop you into it. So everybody, any other questions? One more question? Yep.
Actually, my question probably Todd might be able to share more insights. Is that among the 11 countries and markets, has TTI any tier strategy about what's the second tier outside the hub, like Singapore, Malaysia, like any particular markets going to be rolling out next?
I didn't quite catch the question. I'm sorry.
The question was about, obviously we've got now a Singapore and Malaysian kind of presence in the Southeast Asia market. Have we considered the kind of second, third tier kind of market entry into that? I can answer that. Kristan's 4 days in, and we are certainly going to work on that together. And probably, you know, again, having boots on the ground really helps. And I think, look, over the journey working with Austrade, yep, Vietnam, you know, Indonesia, we've got a sister state relationship with Indonesia that probably, you know, we probably need to go and really get in there and see what we can actually do. I don't think we really utilise some of that. I think also free trade agreements. I don't think sometimes as companies, as an industry, as an export fraternity, I'm not sure we're utilising those benefits to use that as a selling point. So I think that's the other part too that we could look at. But certainly I know, so Kristan and we as a team are working on the kind of wider business plan for the region over the coming probably, you know, 8 to 12 weeks. And then, yeah, happy to share that when we get there. Yeah.
It might be a question for Todd. I just got back from Singapore, but one of the things that I recognised was there's perhaps an opportunity in the innovation and perhaps investor sector. I just wondered whether you have a strategy in that space and whether there's anything that you are doing there that might be relevant.
Yeah, I can take this. So within the department, we've got, when the Marshall government came in, we took a stop and we kind of went out to industry and said, right, what's the step change in the economy? This is before COVID, of course, but what are the things that we can do? We went out to industry to ask, what do we need to do? And what we identified were 9 priority sectors. And the 9 priority sectors are part of the growth state plan. And that all sounds, you know, governmentally and political and all that stuff. But the 9 key sectors are areas where we can, you know, as a state, have competitive advantage globally to help grow. So that's, you know, energy and mining, health and medical, food, wine, agribusiness, high-tech industries, creative industries, international education, international tourism, space, defence. There you go. I always do it, and I always mix them up, but I got there in the end. So yeah, so those 9 priorities. Now, anybody outside of those sectors doesn't mean we don't help you. Absolutely, we can do some bespoke things, and we do that with. We've got a company out at Gawler that's doing really innovative chicken feeders of all things, and we've helped them break into Canada. So you get these odd little pockets of opportunity that we help, right? But yeah, food, wine, ag's a big piece of what we do in the state. So it's a, you know, we've got a big team. So we've got 9 sector teams within the department. A lot of them work on the investment space, and it is about, you know, investment attraction. So Kristan's role and Adil's role is not only just to help connect with, you know, from an export point of view, but also, you know, companies in key sectors like renewables, defence, space, and there's 9 sectors is looking at, you know, opportunity for investment in, and whether that is, yeah, an investment like export forms many different areas. So couple of areas here, renewables, hydrogen's a big piece, space, obviously with the space agency here now. International ed is obviously in a challenge bit with bums on seats, but there's, you know, as Kristan said, for the region, anything with tech, you know, ed tech, med tech, ag tech, you know, all of those. Also talking about, you know, exporting this, you know, nous instead of just products or widgets or people or whatever, exporting services, the other big piece. So yeah, there's a lot on, but yeah, if it's something sector specific with an investment, we'd connect you with our sector team and then get that kind of working with the overseas office. Well, innovation kind of probably sits under high tech and creative. So it's not its own specific sector as such, but yeah, that would sit probably within that space. Yep. Yep. But happy to have that chat. All right. Big round of applause for Kristan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.